Welcome to Save Your Thyroid, a podcast all about thyroid nodules. My name is Jennifer Holcomb, and I advocate for fellow patients suffering with this very common condition. Thyroid nodules impact 70% of adults in their lifetime, and the standard of care is surgical removal of half or all of the gland. But in recent years, safe and effective non-surgical treatment options have become available. In this podcast, I sit down with patients and physicians to discuss life with thyroid nodules, treatment options, and how to save the thyroid whenever possible. Hello, everyone. In today's episode, if you don't know me, I'm going to go back and tell my whole thyroid nodule story going all the way back to 2013. I'll share about my diagnosis, why I refused surgery, how I discovered thyroid RFA, my 2 RFA procedures, and how much my nodule has shrunk in the years since. So grab your coffee or your cup of tea, and I'll just tell you my whole story. So who am I? I'm a wife of 17 plus years to my amazing husband and a mom of 2 girls. Many people ask me about my background because I've been making videos for the past 4 years. I have a background in music, art, and a brief background in teaching, only for about 3 years. I do not have a medical background or a professional video or media background or a marketing background either. That's also a question I frequently am asked. I do not have any professional background in media, marketing, video, podcasting, writing, any of that. A bit more on that later. Let's go back to 2013. March of 2013, I had a car accident. I was driving through an intersection and a woman who was distracted by her 2 rather large dogs in her car ran a red light and T-boned my car at about 40 miles per hour. I was thankful that I was able to walk away from that accident. However, I believe that trauma to the side of my neck and the whiplash and everything may have been at least one part of the origin of my thyroid nodules. So about a year later, in March of 2014, I was actually at the OB's office for a follow-up, and he was talking with me, and he stopped in the middle of his sentence, and he kind of looked at me funny. And I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "Well, you look like you have a lump in your throat." And he came over and looked a little closer and palpated my neck. And I reached up and felt my neck, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're right. I had not noticed that." He set me up with an ultrasound appointment and all of that. So it didn't start off at the normal, ENT or an endocrinologist office. I remember going out of the office and sitting in my car and freaking out for a minute. I actually had a friend at the time who had lymphoma. And so I was immediately thinking, this is really bad. And I had watched my friend go through chemo and have a really hard time. And so I text her and I'm like, I just found out I had this lump in my throat. I have to go have an ultrasound. I have to have a biopsy. She tried to just reassure me, don't get upset yet. You don't know what's going on until you go and you have those tests. So fast forward through 6 weeks of agony, waiting for all of my appointments and follow up from those appointments to transpire. And I did not have cancer. I had a cystic multinodular goiter. What do you do with that? So I'm sent to the ENT's office to consult on that. I'd never met him before, but I'd heard a lot of good things. And so I thought, okay, well, this guy's going to help me. And he walked in and he pretty much was like, "You got a lump in your throat. I can take it out. I can put you on meds, or you can just leave it alone. Choice is up to you." And I was kind of stunned because he didn't want to know my medical history. He didn't help me figure out why I had this nodule or these nodules. I actually had multiple nodules. Most of them were on the right side. I did have one small one on the left. At that point, I said, "Well, no, I don't have any interest in having surgery. I don't really want to take meds. I'll look into that and research it." Pretty much just left and went home and did my own homework from that point on. After researching a little bit and receiving a follow-up phone call from the doctor saying, we want to put you on thyroid medicine. Even though your lab work is normal, we think that suppressing your thyroid function with this medicine may help shrink your nodules. And that keyword suppressing kind of made me a little bit unsure that I was okay with that, because I just felt like if my thyroid's functioning and you want to suppress that function with a drug, how is that going to help anything? I kind of put that out of my mind, decided to just live with it and hopefully, maybe it would go away. That was in 2014. In 2015, I became pregnant with my second child. I don't know exactly what the status of my nodules were at that time, except for that they were there. I wasn't really continuing with follow-up, but I do know that during the course of my pregnancy, the nodules began to become more noticeable, more visible. I started to sort of feel it when I would swallow. It wasn't bad, but when you're pregnant, all kinds of things are happening, and I just kind of chalked it up to that. Then by 2016, I started to have a lot of thyroid symptoms. After my child was born, I had inflammation, a lot of symptoms of low thyroid. I was achy all the time, tired all the time. Thyroid would hurt and feel swollen, difficulty swallowing. I just felt horrible. It's normal to feel bad after you have a baby, but I felt really bad and it didn't go away. It didn't get better. And of course, the nodule was still there and it was still growing. Then in 2018, we actually moved. We did a massive renovation of our old house before we put it on the market. I was under a lot of stress. I was exposed to a lot of chemicals. I'm pretty sure that during that time, this thing was just getting bigger and bigger from all of the chemicals I was exposed to. And I really, at the end of all of that, in October of 2018, I was just feeling horrible, really awful. Most of the days, my oldest daughter would go to school, and it would be all I could do to get through the day with my younger daughter until the older one got picked up in the afternoon. It was just a daily struggle. In early 2019, I decided, okay, something's got to give. I'm going to go see if I can find some help for this thyroid nodule or my thyroid function, because at that point, I fully expected that I had Hashimoto's disease. I had every single symptom. I was sensitive to gluten. I was exhausted. I was puffy. I couldn't lose weight. I just felt like trash, really, really bad all the time. And every single day was a huge struggle. I went to the doctor. I went to a new doctor, did all of the standard labs, thyroid labs, antibodies, everything you could possibly think of for the thyroid, plus everything else. And they all came back normal. But he did notice my thyroid lump. And he did feel of it. And he said, whoa, this thing is really big. You really need to go see someone about that. At that point, I saw the ENT, a different ENT this time. And he walked in, and very much like the previous ENT, which I found to be quite interesting, walked in, and before he ever introduced himself, he starts talking about doing surgery on me. He starts talking about how amazing this surgery is and how easy this surgery is and how great he is at doing it and how low the complications are, and just, extolling the virtues of doing this surgery. And I just could not believe that he had not even introduced himself to me before he got into all of this. At that point, I was already a little gun shy. I needed someone to help me figure out why I had this nodule, not tell me about how great it would be after he took it out. Before ever even going into this appointment, I was already very wary of having surgery, any kind of surgery. And I'll tell that story here in just a moment. And I asked him, I said, is this an emergency? Am I going to have my trachea collapse? Am I in danger? And he said, no. As long as you feel like you can live with it, we can leave it alone. But at some point, you're probably going to need to have it taken out. So I was like, great, no problem. And I just decided, I'm going to go home and continue to do my own research. So that was in early, I want to say like February, March of 2019. I had a follow-up biopsy on both sides. Both of them, the big one and the little one, came back benign. In May of 2019, things were doing pretty good. I'd been trying to clean up my diet, trying to figure out if there was anything I could do lifestyle-wise to make this thing go away, or at least to reduce it in size. I had even started taking a new medication called low-dose naltrexone. No, I am not an addict. That medication in really low doses is actually really good at helping relieve a lot of autoimmune conditions, symptoms of those conditions. And so I started taking a very low dose of that and actually was feeling a lot better and had lost a few pounds and my lab markers improved. And I thought, this is really great. This is encouraging. In fact, there's even some studies that show that in mice or rats, I can't remember which, that tumors can shrink with the use of this medication, low-dose naltrexone. So I thought maybe we found our winner here. But by May of that year, I actually developed a urinary tract infection. This is something I've never experienced before. I was feeling really bad and I contacted my doctor. I didn't hear back from him. And so like 2 days into this UTI, I finally heard back from him. And at that point, my symptoms were really bad and I was really getting concerned. It had gone on for too long to not take antibiotics. So I reluctantly took Cipro, and a pretty serious antibiotic. I just didn't feel right about it because I had this gut feeling that this was not the right thing to do, but I did it anyway. I should have listened to my gut because within 3 days of taking that antibiotic, I started having horrible symptoms of an allergic reaction. I started getting this really disgusting looking rash on the back of my neck. I noticed that my throat felt really constricted and even noticed in the mirror that it looked swollen. And I started reading about Cipro and learned that I should never have taken that drug because it is not good for anyone with any kind of thyroid problems to take Cipro or any fluoride-based drug for that matter. And I will record another podcast about that in the future. But for now, if you are someone with thyroid issues, please do not take any drug that contains fluoride. Called the doctor and the doctor said, stop taking it immediately. He told me what to do to try to fix the allergic reaction. And the rash did go away, but the swelling did not go away. In fact, it got worse. Over the next 2 weeks, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I had started to feel constricted enough to the point where I felt like I was choking. I would just be sitting there and then all of a sudden be like, oh. I called my husband and said, I think you need to come back home and take me to the ER because I can't swallow food without choking. So he takes me to the ER. They do a CT scan. At the point of right here at my trachea, it was 4.5 centimeters wide. That is wider than a golf ball. So it was literally like I had swallowed a golf ball and it was stuck. And the nodule was also it was around 6.5 centimeters long. But at this point, the width of it was what was really constricting me. And at that time, I couldn't even like turn my head to the side to look. Say I was going down the grocery store aisle or I was driving and I needed to look both ways at a stop sign. I couldn't do that without feeling like I was going to pass out. It was so much pressure in my neck. And of course, the ER couldn't do anything for me except for tell me, well, you're not going to die, but you need to follow up with your ENT surgeon. At this point, I start preparing myself thinking, okay, now I'm going to have surgery. This is really bad. I can't live like this. If this thing gets any bigger, I'm going to choke to death. When I finally do go back to see my ENT, he says, yeah, we need to take it out. Surgery is important at this time. I said, well, I had this surgery, actually 2 surgeries, when I was 18 years old on my knee. And those surgeries went really badly. And in fact, I almost died. I had a staph infection and took lots and lots and lots of Cipro for that staph infection. And it devastated my health and it devastated my life. I had to drop out of college. It took me 3 months to learn how to walk again. And in years since then, I've been told never to have surgery again unless I'm dying. And now you're telling me, after I've just had an allergic reaction to Cipro, that I need to have surgery. By the way, I'm allergic to a lot of other antibiotics. So if I have this surgery and I have this infection come back, which I've been told that would be very likely, what are you going to give me for the infection? And he just shrugged his shoulders and said, we'll let the infectious disease department handle that. And at that point, I knew I was done with him. I mean, no offense to this doctor if he ever ends up watching my videos, but I just felt like at that point, he didn't care enough about my situation to advocate for me. And I wasn't going to passively go into something where I didn't feel like my doctor and I were on the same page. And so I refused surgery. If you want to learn more about my knee situation, I have a video on that you can watch on my YouTube channel. I go home, I research like crazy. Literally in the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep. I was up because, lying down, I couldn't breathe. So I was propped up on pillows and I was having a really hard time sleeping. And I was up in the middle of the night because I had just finally given up. And I was just sitting there crying and thinking about, I'm going to have this surgery. What's it going to do to me? What is this going to be like if I have to go through what I went through at 18 all over again? And it was making me sick, physically sick. I just said, okay, God, I don't know if there's an answer, but if there is, would you please help me find it? Because I don't think I can do this surgery. And quite literally, the next thing I scrolled through on Google, it was Google Images actually, was an image of a neck that had this tiny little dot right here. And it said, treat thyroid nodules without surgery. And I clicked on that and it took me to a website for 2 doctors in Utah who are doing RFA procedures on thyroid nodules. So I digested that entire website. I was looking for patient testimonials. I wanted to know all about this. And unfortunately, in 2019, there was not a lot of information about this available, except for in the form of medical journals. But I've always been a researcher and very curious, and I was not afraid to read these medical journals. I dug into them. I Googled all the words I didn't understand. I watched videos. I learned everything I could possibly learn about RFA. And at that time, there were literally 2 places in the United States that were offering this. And I learned from one doctor who I called, who was actually not offering the procedure yet, but was planning to start offering it. I learned from her about the doctor I ended up seeing, and I was incredibly grateful to get that information because I could not find that information online. I discovered my doctor, Dr. Alwyn Park at the University of Virginia. I knew at this point that this was going to be what I wanted to do. I was very confident in the procedure, and I sought a consult with him, found out I was a candidate, and scheduled the appointment. So it was going to be in July of 2019. And at that point, I decided I couldn't possibly be the only person who needs to know about this procedure. With a smartphone piled up on a stack of books, I filmed my first YouTube video, and I just used what I had at that time available to me to get the message out. So I published that video. I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'll let you know how it goes. So we're driving up to Virginia. Even though I had been educating myself and I knew all of the things to expect from all of the things I had read, I was still nervous. And like I said, I had only found 2 online video testimonials of patients. And I just really wished that I had someone I could talk to who had been through this themselves. And through a miracle, I actually was able to connect with someone. She was able to answer all of my unanswered questions and provide me with a great deal of confidence in my doctor, who was actually also her doctor. I had my RFA in July of 2019. Everything was just as my new friend had said. And on the way home from Virginia, I told my husband that I wanted to start a Facebook group to help other people as I had been helped by this person. And that way more people could find out about RFA and read patient testimonials. So fast forward a few more months, my nodule is shrinking. I can see a difference in my neck. I'm feeling better. And I'm thrilled. But part of my nodule at the first treatment was not actually accessible. All of my nodule was not above the collarbone. About 20% of it was too far down to access. And my doctor treated the upper part. And he said that as that upper part shrank, it would just move up the bottom part. And so by March of 2020, my lower 20% had moved up, and I scheduled my second procedure. I had the second procedure the Friday before the world shut down from COVID. My husband had taken the week off to take me and be with me as I was recovering afterwards. And he never went back to work because when we came back home, everything was shut down. His office was shut down. The schools were shut down. It was crazy. My doctor called me the Monday after my procedure and said that UVA had stopped doing elective procedures. And I was so grateful that I had gotten in my procedure right before everything shut down. Over the course of 2020, my nodule continued to shrink. I continued to feel better. I continued to improve in other ways too, not just with my thyroid. I lost 30 pounds and all of my symptoms that I had had with the thyroid nodule went away, but also the symptoms I had had back in 2018 of feeling fatigued, feeling like I had Hashimoto's, feeling hypothyroid, all of that went away and all of my labs were great. By July of 2021, I went to see my doctor again for a follow-up. Locally, unfortunately, no one in this area does RFA, or at that time, at least, no one in this area did RFA. And no one who did ultrasounds really understood what they were looking at when they looked at my thyroid that had been treated with RFA, and they would immediately freak out and think that I had thyroid cancer. But I made the trip to Virginia for an ultrasound, learned that at 2 years after my first RFA, that I had a 90% reduction in my thyroid nodule. So it was originally between 65 and 75 milliliters in volume, which is so big that the ultrasound screen literally cannot show the entirety of the nodule. It's so big, it's going off the edges of the screen. They couldn't measure it precisely, but they knew that it was between 65 and 75 milliliters. At my 2-year follow-up, it had gone down to 6 milliliters in volume. And that is so small and so insignificant and not visible and not causing symptoms that my doctor and I agreed that there was no need for further treatment. Last year, July of 2022, I went for my 3-year follow-up. I've maintained that 90% reduction and I still do not need any further treatment. So what we will plan to do is continue to follow up once a year and make sure that everything is staying the same. If at some point in the future that remaining 6 milliliters does increase in size, we will take care of it at that point. But for now, I'm doing great. I am incredibly grateful to have these results and to be able to have my swallowing and my breathing be normal, to not have a giant lump in my throat, to feel good, to not have any of those Hashimoto's or hypothyroid symptoms. I just will never stop talking about this. As I said in the intro, 70% of people have thyroid nodules in their lifetime. And when that many people have a problem, and so many people are having thyroid surgery, and so many people after thyroid surgery aren't feeling well on the medication, somebody has to talk about this. And so that is why I have all of these media outlets now. As I said, I don't have a background in media, but I don't have to be able to speak out about things that might preserve a patient's quality of life. And so on this podcast, you will hear other patients tell their stories. You'll hear updates from me on my story, and I'll be interviewing physicians who have decided to adopt RFA or any other thermal ablation procedures that shrink thyroid nodules without surgery, because now there's actually a few other procedures that have become available since 2019. There's microwave ablation, laser ablation, cryoablation. Stay tuned to this podcast. Learn more about non-surgical treatment options for thyroid nodules and for some thyroid cancers and for some metastatic thyroid cancer lymph nodes. Not everyone who has thyroid cancer is a candidate for a thermal ablation procedure, but many patients who develop very small thyroid cancers or have had a thyroid neck surgery and they have a thyroid recurrence and it's a very small lymph node can be treated with a thermal ablation procedure and avoid surgery. So this podcast will be your resource for all of that information. Patient focused as always, because I am also a patient. If you want to hear my story, watch my previous videos on my YouTube channel where I shared my story as it was happening. You can go to It's Me Jen Again on YouTube, playlist entitled My Personal Thyroid Radiofrequency Ablation RFA Journey. Thanks so much for listening. Please share this content and help others. If you need resources, testimonials, and support, please join our patient community, Save Your Thyroid. You can also find me on social media and Substack under the media handle, It's Me Jen Again. Never forget to educate yourself and be your own advocate and save your thyroid.